Have you ever walked into a room and looked around and felt like everybody was going to find you out, or they're going to realize that you shouldn't be there, or that you weren't good enough, that you didn't have enough experience, or whatever story you were telling yourself? Have you ever felt that way? Like you've been there, like, oh no, they're going to know. I have for sure. Many, many times in all the years of my business and doing different businesses. And I know for a fact, 82% of women in leadership feel the same way. So you're not alone. So that is something called imposter syndrome. I'm Alicia Soikawa, the Empowered Woman, and I'm here to talk about imposter syndrome and why it's really lying to you and that you actually belong exactly where you're supposed to be. And this is proof on why. I just had a coaching call this morning with a client that was saying, I need to get out of the scarcity mindset. It's really not a scarcity mindset. It's a mindset of, oh my gosh, you're achieving the things you want. You're showing up into the rooms you want to be in. And then, oh no, all of a sudden, like, you're not supposed to be there. Like, that's what you think, but you are. You're supposed to be there. You've earned every right to be there. Another one of my coaching clients today told me she just renewed her license for the 25th year of being an agent. And she just now feels like she is qualified enough to speak on being an agent. And I was like, good God, woman, like 25 years. And I was laughing because many people don't even make it that long in marriage, let alone a career. So that alone is huge. And I made her promise me that she was going to celebrate that huge milestone this year. And she is 1,000% qualified, probably been qualified through, I don't know how many markets in real estate to speak on that, right? So this is kind of like what I wanted to tell you about is so many people find that imposter syndrome, the feeling of not enough when we're showing up in business and in life. And I want to call out that it is a really a silent shame that us women go through on carrying this weight of like, gosh, am I good enough? I don't know if I can do it. Even after we've gotten success and checked the box and won the accolades and awards and done all the things, we still question, are we in the right room? Do we deserve to be in the room? The biggest thing I think about is when we talk about imposter syndrome or being an imposter, that's a huge problem for some people. The solution for that is that the version of you feels like a fraud is actually proof that you're leveling up, because you're never settling for where you are. You're always saying, I want more. I want to be a better version of myself. And so when you're doing that, sometimes in our head psychologically, we go, oh, well, I'm not supposed to be in this room yet because I'm not qualified to be there yet. But when in actuality, you have to keep pushing higher and higher and higher to achieve those things. And so sometimes you're going to be in a place that feels unfamiliar, uncomfortable. The thermostat feels like it's too high when you want to lower it. That is a specific sign that you're growing and you're leveling up and that you should get used to being uncomfortable. There's even, I think, a little magnet my husband got me a while back that says, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I just think that's a really great quote. A long time ago when I first read it, I was like, huh? That doesn't even make sense. I don't want to be uncomfortable. I want to be comfortable. But actually comfort, it is cozy. I'm not going to lie. I'm just thinking of like being in my bed and how cozy it is. But that is where a lot of dreams die, in comfort, right? That's a lot of places where we negotiate with ourselves that it's good enough, but you may want more for yourself, right? So when you're thinking about the solution and knowing that you're exactly where you're supposed to be, one of the things I want to talk about, why does this happen, in my opinion? A lot of why imposter syndrome happens is like we taste a little bit of what we want. We may get the position or win the award or win the account or something is going our way or win the relationship. And all of a sudden you go, oh no, like it's like you don't feel worthy of having that success, whatever that success is. So you start like thinking of all the things that could go wrong, right? Or that you're just not supposed to be there and someone's going to figure you out and that's why you shouldn't be there. And I think it's a brain wiring issue. And a lot of that comes from our childhood conditioning, number one, and the concept of achievement trauma. Let's say you win this award for the best in something. Then you might say, well, I only got it, that was last year and now it's this year. Like you won't allow yourself the opportunity to celebrate yourself and you won't allow yourself the opportunity to see the achievement that you've accomplished and how much you've gotten to get there. And a lot of achievement is interesting because it's a double-sided sword is what I say. One side is great because you probably are very successful if you have achievement-based personality. You're probably someone that's a go-getter, gets the opportunity. You're probably a great provider for your family financially. You're probably someone that always shows up for friends and family and people in your life. So in that achievement, you're someone that gets everything done. You're a doer. And so people recognize that. And there's a lot of accolades and rewards for people in that mentality. And as you're having this personal growth launching, you have to think too, there's an other side to that there is like a heroine feeling of it's never enough. I think there's a song from The Greatest Showman. One of my favorite movies is The Greatest Showman because of the soundtrack, and it's never enough. And it's so true because like once you hit that success, it's never enough because you taste it and you're like, I want more, I want more, I want more. And so you lose the purpose versus just going after the more. And that's why I think it's really important to understand why this imposter syndrome happens, because you may have that success and you go into the room that you want more from and you're like, wait a second, I have to start over again and I don't belong here. And this is just my theory, right? And brain wiring kind of makes us think, oh, we shouldn't be there. We start having these dialogues in our head that are not true because we just have these thoughts that kind of float around. And it's really important to think about that because that also comes from your childhood conditioning. So it's all kind of wrapped together. And what we say is like why this happens, the brain wiring from your childhood conditioning, which then leads to sometimes the concept of achievement trauma or like the pushing and just trying to be enough and trying to be loved. And very much when you're children, most children don't come into the world and think they're less than. Most children don't come into the world that they need to do the things to get love from their parents. You learn by the behaviors around you. So if you have parents that only rewarded you or loved you if you got the A, or if you won the team or won the game, or you did everything correct, or you cleaned your room, you learned very quickly that you got praise and love for certain behaviors and you got punished for other behaviors. And that very simple concept is a lot of what their wiring is around as human beings. And as a parent, you don't even realize you're doing this as a parent, but you're doing it. That was done to you. It's just this ongoing generational thing that happens. One of the things that's huge is understanding why it happens, the brain wiring, and also awareness, self-awareness as a human being, self-awareness now as a parent, as I'm parenting children, and also self-awareness of why I am the way I am. And that is the only place I think change can happen, is if you're aware of the issue, number one, and you want to make the change, and then you take the actions to do it. A lot of the world, I believe, is just ignorant, meaning they don't know any better and they don't want to know any better. So if you have someone that doesn't know any better, but they want to know better, they're going to figure it out, right? Versus someone that doesn't know better and doesn't want to figure it out. So that's someone that I think is in denial, or they're just not wanting to change. And so that's not a growth mindset. And I think the biggest thing is you have to have a personal growth mindset to want to get better, to change the story, to basically end the generational issues that go on and on and on. That's how you do it, right? You have to make the decision for yourself and your family, like no more. And usually it's only after the pain is so great. So when imposter syndrome affects you to the point that it paralyzes you from going to the next step, or you're basically cutting yourself off or sabotaging your success or relationships even, I'm sure we all know what that looks like. We've seen it. There are movies about it, and you don't even know why you're doing it. And it's because you don't think you're worth it. And it's really sad when you think about it, but it's the truth. So you have to think about, how was I raised as a child? What was I praised for? What was I punished for? What were the golden, like the carrot dangling in front of me to go after certain things? Kind of get an understanding of what is it that helped you be successful today or not successful. Will give you more insight on why this is happening to you. So that's what we mean about why it happens and through the brain wiring. The second thing to look at is reframing, right? When you reframe the story in your mind, reframe the conversation, if you can look from the other side of the lens, meaning like if you're feeling with something or having experience of something, if you could put your shoes in someone else's place, that kind of helps you understand where they're coming from. That's what I mean about reframing. And imposter feelings as growing pains, instead of it, showing up as you're not stagnant, you're not standing still, that when you have that feeling of imposter, it's really about growing. It's really about you going to the next level. And I think that's really, really important, because not everybody feels that it's a positive thing, and not everybody feels that there's shame around it. Like if you feel imposter, no, I'm fine, but you don't want to admit that that's really what's going on with you, right? Sometimes it's out of fear, uncertainty, and it's that place of you have to keep pushing to grow. And it's actually something that should be celebrated, and everyone goes through it. Even Tony Robbins talks about it. I saw him in his speech at one of our big meetings or conferences, and he mentioned, like, I even go through through imposter syndrome, and I'm thinking, what? Like, how is that possible? But everybody does. Celebrities talk about it. So many people talk about it in the world, and so you're not alone. So know that first, you're not alone, and that if you are growing and doing amazing things in the world, you're probably going to have imposter syndrome at some point in your career, and to embrace it and go, yes, I'm on the right track. So psychology tools is another thing for solution of it, is like understanding how to identity shift and, evidence stack. Right? There's something I have my clients do when they're beating themselves up, they're feeling like less than, is about evidence stacking, about going, you know what, this is what you need to do. Like, what was the last evidence that showed that you're qualified to do this? You may have been successful at a different deal. You may have won over someone. You may did a speech somewhere else and you're really nervous about talking to another big group. It's about really finding that evidence that showed before that why you are qualified and why you're on the right track, and that you're just basically sabotaging yourself, talking to yourself about what you can and cannot do that's not even true. So that's an amazing psychology tool to have, and give yourself a different shift and see yourself in this different identity. And also mirror dialogue. Like, sometimes it's just like talking to yourself and saying, self, I got this. Today, actually, when I was shooting these videos, because I had shot these same videos with the same scripts a few days ago, and somehow the card got corrupted and they went away, and I was like freaked out about it. And I thought, you know what? I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. There's a reason why I need to reshoot the videos. I'm not changing the fact that they're gone. So I might as well just get over it and move on. And I think the faster you understand that and you can mirror that dialogue about how you want to feel, then you don't do the poor me and no one loves me, and you don't start, I call it circling the drain, which is a very dangerous place to be. And I think a lot of people love to go into the whole self-pity, victimization mode, especially in our world today. I would say don't allow that to happen, and always go back to the evidence that showed before. That's why journaling is so powerful. If you can go back and see who you were before and all your journey and all the things you've overcome and achieved, it's amazing. Like, no matter how bad your day is, they say you've survived, you've made it this far, you've survived through everything, right? And 10 times likely that whatever you're going through today, you've accomplished and you've achieved things that were 10 times harder than that. You just didn't realize it at the time. And so that's what I mean about going back and look at evidence stacking for yourself. The last thing I want to talk about solution-wise to kind of overcome imposter syndrome, at least kick it down the road for a little bit until you can get your brain straight, would be the self-love reframe. I talk a lot about self-love recently and love yourself because I think it's a big issue in the world today, especially in women, that we've learned to berate ourselves. We've learned to be really mean to ourselves, or self-talk. I'm guilty of it. It's just not good. And it's not a great place to be if you can't even be loving yourself and kind to yourself. How can you expect to love other people? Like, you have to love yourself first. And I wanted to go back and circle back around about how you are not underqualified to be in the room when you're feeling imposter syndrome or less than. You're actually under-celebrated. We are not in a habit as a driving culture, as an achievement culture, to celebrate our wins. It's actually really quick and then we move on. We don't allow ourselves to take joy in all the wins that we have daily, or the glimmers, even seeing the little glimmers of, like, if it's a beautiful day and enjoying that, or just remembering the house that you prayed for you live in today, or the children that you hope to have or in your life and you're able to be a parent if that's something you want. Or if you have a beautiful marriage, even if they're annoying you, that fact that you have a partner in life to do things with, and to understand that that is a huge win that you may have not even thought about before. And so I think one of the things that I do for myself is really just kind of be still. We all have harder days where you're just like, I just don't feel like I'm like supposed to be where I am, and I feel like a fraud, and I feel like I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I think so many people will tell you if they've been through that journey or they feel lost and confused in that place of going to the next step, that you just have to trust. I think, it's so crucial to trust yourself and the guidance and the intuition that you have, especially as a woman. And, what I know is true is that if you use those 4 things to figure out why it's happening to you, even just talking to yourself and saying, I know why I feel this way, because I always was taught that when I was younger, that I shouldn't celebrate myself, or don't, that's being egotistical, or whatever story you were told when you were a child that it's like ingrained in your head. I mean, it's very difficult to scratch that record and re-put yourself on a new path consistently day over day. Sometimes we can win and sometimes we don't win. And I think you need to know, have the awareness to know, why is this happening? Stop it, have that conversation, say, my past self, my 6 to 8 year old self, which is what you learn in Chase Hughes's talk about how our basically whole personality and confidence and everything we learn as a child is pretty much ingrained in us between the ages of 6 and 9 years old, something like that. And it's so true if you think about it. If you really go back to that time in your life, what was being said about you? What were you encouraged to do? I was always told I wasn't going to be good at math. I was always told that you don't know these things, which is not true. I'm actually very bright. I can be very analytical if I choose to be so. And so I think that's the story that I heard. And I allowed that to be my story for so many years until I said, no, I'm going to figure out what a P&L is. I'm going to figure out how to run a business in numbers and look at analytics. And we are actually much more smarter than we give ourselves credit for. But if I allowed that story, my childhood framing, wiring to kind of take over, then I would never have allowed myself to even be curious enough to learn. And curiosity will help that. That's also a solution. So, figure out why it happens, reframe it is huge. Reframing things in general is huge. And I find that being very helpful in many areas, not just with imposter syndrome. Using those psychology tools of identity shifting, saying, hey, I know I want to be this person and this is what this person demands, like stepping into that role, like putting your cape on if you're like a superhero, or the stance that you do, or doctors have their jackets on, or even Martin Luther King wore glasses every time he did a speech and wrote. It's like you're putting a new identity on. So put the identity on of who you want to step into and be when you're in that role. So when you're at home, maybe you have the mom identity. When you're at work, you're the boss identity, just depending on what you're wanting to show up as. And I think the last one, the self-love reframe, again, is the most crucial. Just being kind to yourself, loving yourself, being still, allowing people to love you and receiving, and not beating yourself up will help you in that imposter mindset, knowing I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I see this often. It's so true. If you can be rooted in that place and self-grounded and knowing that you're in the right place at all times, no matter what, and you're learning the right things you're supposed to be doing. So if you're in a room, you're supposed to be in the room. And if you've ever felt like a fraud in the room, like I said before, I'm probably going to venture and say you're probably the boldest, most badass person in the room. And I would reframe that to say that out loud instead. And I'm curious if you can comment below, I belong, if you've done the healing journey, if you're overcoming imposter syndrome, if you have any other hacks for that, love to hear it. And until next time, stay empowered, and I'll talk to you soon.